Hi everyone, welcome back. We're Love is Healing LLC and we provide psychotherapy and really integrative mental health services. We also provide shamanic healing and things like that. Really the purpose of this channel more than anything is to target people who are working actively on addressing their complex trauma and to help bridge gaps because I believe that love is in fact healing. The more that we love ourselves, the more we can love other people. The more that we accept ourselves, the more we can accept other people. Because after all, in this life, it's like, it's so short. We're just here for a little bit of time. And like, we can choose to be angry or we can be perpetually angry, or we can choose paths of love and forgiveness and grace and things like that, right? We all have different processes and things like that, which brings us to our topic of today. And so I'm Magnolia. I'm the owner, clinical director, founder, and this is
Brittany. I am one of the therapists at Love is Healing, and I also do some admin things. So I'm glad you all were able to join us in this video today.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. The topic for today is grief. I don't know. What do you want to say on grief, Brittany?
Gosh, I think when I think of grief, I think about like loss in a lot of different forms. I think that for a long time, I thought it was just about like death. And now it's expanded a lot, and I've noticed grief in different areas of my own life. Like even in some areas where I move on to something positive, I feel grief for some of the things I've left behind. And I think understanding that has helped me kind of understand myself better and understand like how I respond to things. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of grief, is just how expansive it can be.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, for me, and working a lot with people on their trauma and processing all of that, I did notice that a lot of grief did come up. And then I just started to conceptualize like, hey, I think that trauma work inherently is grief work because there is a lot of like childhood stuff really mostly is what it comes down to for the most part. And so it's like, yeah, I'm sad I didn't have a mom who was emotionally available, or that my dad was gone, or that my dad died, or something like that, or that my siblings bullied me, right? And it is that sadness, but really that sadness is grief, you know? I think of depression in general as like grief that hasn't been able to be expressed just because like for example, say this is a person and they've been depressed their whole life for a long time, right? It's like more often than not, they've been in environments and situations and relationships where they weren't able to express themselves, be fully authentic, be around safe people, you know? Because it is, I mean, I think of depression as like coming in and just kind of being frozen, you know, among other things. But yeah,
Definitely understand that. And I really appreciated when you put trauma in the lens of grief, because it seems like trauma can be, in a lot of cases, like grieving possibilities or opportunities that could have been. And I think a lot of people experience that. And it's just not something I had framed that way before, but it makes a lot of sense.
definitely. Yeah. Yes. And y'all, we don't necessarily know what we're talking about today, but I was like, hey, you want to make a video? She was like, yeah. And so here we are. It's just kind of free flowing. I like that though. I like that you mentioned the stages. Well, that's just kind of how I looked at it, right? Like when you said like about grief. Yeah. Something that I learned about like say shamanism, right, is that, and again, for those of you who don't know, shamanism isn't denominational. It's just something that like kind of everybody has access to, right? It's just like acknowledging the elements and like finding healing. One extreme could be like herbalism, right? And then another extreme could be just like, oh man, I just love the smell of flowers or something. And then anything in between, right? For medicine or not. But just the healing effects, even grounding, anything like that could be considered a form of shamanism. But anyhow, one thing that I learned say from shamanism is that with every death, there's always a rebirth, right? So then let's say I graduated from college. Yay, this is so exciting. Finally, I did it. I've been in school for so long. I went nonstop. Great. Also, and it's a new beginning. I finished the schooling and now it's a new beginning. And like I'm moving on to adulthood, and so that's a new birth, but it's the end of my childhood kind of thing, you know, or being seen as a child or having less responsibility in society kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so forth, right? I'm so excited to have this new job. Also, I'm really gonna miss staying at home, or I'm really gonna miss my old coworkers or something, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, like, is worth noting about grieving different stages in life?
Gosh, I think looking at the different types of grief, um, like for a long time, I hadn't really had a word for what it's like to preemptively feel grief. And then I finally learned about like anticipatory grief and knowing that something is going to change or there is going to be a loss of some sort. And I think that's really helped change my perspective. And I think that is something that comes up in examples like what you just described of like, oh, I'm so excited I'm moving on to this new job, but I'm going to miss my old coworkers. Just like knowing that you're going to be leaving in those 2 weeks, like it's a very strange feeling that I didn't have a label for a long time.
It's a strange interim too, I think in particular, huh? With that specific example.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I think as you said, deaths, of course, are pretty obvious how they tie into grief, right? And it's not just like humans, of course, there's also pets and like all the memories and things like that. I want to acknowledge that. I don't have any pets myself, but I know tons of people, of course, being a millennial, a lot of people have pets. And it's like, yeah, they're companions, they're confidants, they're cuddle buddies, they're co-regulators and all these things. So I mean it matters. And I'm glad that our culture just in general is more accommodating of that and understanding, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a pet owner and I have gone through grief with animals and like animals I've grown up with and things like that. And it's powerful. It really is. I think people definitely need to give it credit. It's really important.
Yeah, your little buddies. Huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be like a really important source of attachment and like safety and regulation, especially for like younger people. So I think
Yeah.
it's a big positive, but the grief comes along with it, right?
Yeah, totally. Especially amidst a bunch of trauma.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's say your dog, cat, whatever's your only safe person. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then like there's of course relationships. I'm gonna come back to death in a little bit, but relationships. I think I'm a highly sensitive person. I mean, I am. Yeah, I really am. As much as I maybe want to deny it or something, sometimes I am. And I think I have a memory of an elephant in a lot of ways. But like I had a best friend of 15 years, right? And man, I really miss her. But like we broke up and it was this whole thing. But like I still think of her, and this was probably four, 4 or 5 years ago, probably like 4 years ago. And it's like it's still painful. One thing that I found with grief, even then, it's like it's interesting because I think about like networks and attachment and things like that and nodes, right? We're studying like EMDR a little bit more, and it's like, what are my relationship templates? What are my friendship templates? And it's like, oh, you're cool, I like you. Are you best friend material or not? Oh, I had a best friend once, and then going down that line of thinking, right? Or not once, but several, but still. And it's like, I don't know. If it's unresolved, you're gonna still probably have that pain or something like that. Maybe if you don't have closure, right? I think it comes up a lot in breakups, right? Do you have any words on the friendship or
Yeah,
romantic
I would
breakups?
have to say, I've been through both type of relationship endings, and it's really hard. I think some people don't put as much credit into like friendships, like you're describing ending. I've had a similar experience, and it was very painful, and it's painful to look back on. But I think that sometimes when I describe it to people, they're like, "Oh, well, it was just a friend," and I mean, sometimes that's been more powerful than some of the romantic relationships I've ended. So. I definitely understand people when they carry that with them.
Mm, absolutely. And then I think related to that, it's funny it came up. So Brittany and I were discussing before this of like I keep getting on this theme of like speaking your truth or like people can't define who you are, right? And so it's coming up now again of like, who are they to tell you that your grief isn't valid? Right. And I don't mean that in like an angry, vengeful way, like, oh, who are they? I'm gonna lash out at them. It's like looking at it objectively, like, really though, they can say whatever they want. Is your grief real? Is your pain real? Okay, then it is. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've also met people who have said they don't feel like they deserve to grieve, like maybe they didn't feel as connected to a certain person as other people were, and that's also really difficult. Like I feel like any grief doesn't deserve to be discounted like that. Anything you're feeling is real. And really reiterating that for people so they can give themselves that experience, because I feel like that's one thing that'll have them pushing it away, is kind of making themselves feel like they don't deserve to have that space, when they do, and it's important.
Absolutely. Yeah. When people die, I guess I want to talk a little bit about like just how to grieve, maybe, right? Just some tips. And it's not like we're experts on grief and this is the way, right? Because I think social media has become a lot of that. It's like, this is the law, right? Brittany, can you talk a little bit about the concept of moving on, how that's been coming up for you a lot? Like, oh, you should move on.
Yeah, I've heard a theme of people talking about feeling like they should have moved on from their grief and kind of like judging themselves for still carrying these things. And it's something that I've tried to approach and reframe in a way that, like, we never really stop grieving. Like, grief can come in waves. It can be years later and there'll be a song, a smell, an event that can remind us of somebody that we lost, and it comes back. I think that instead of moving on, what we do is learn how to carry it with us. We learn how to cope with those things that might trigger memories of grief and change them into something that's more of a pleasant memory rather than something that makes you think of what you've lost. And so that's something that I definitely like to tell people, is to give themselves some grace and just try to let go of the concept that moving on is what needs to happen, because it's not really.
Definitely. It's gone and you're permanently changed, huh?
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. I had a shaman teacher who would say, like, whenever we'd have a training, he would always say, like, never again, or all of us gonna be here meeting, really, period. But then also, like, never quite in the same way and with the same purpose. And I'm like, wow, that's true. This is very fleeting. And it's like these profound healing experiences that you have as a group and getting to know each other. But it's true, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. And I think that like, yeah, still like if you do have emotional charges, it is worth exploring like what is causing those charges, right? I'll use a personal example. So like my dad died. He was, I don't know if you've seen my videos. I'm talking a lot about my dad because I'm processing a lot around my dad. But he was like my main, right? And yeah, so yeah, I'm a therapist, supervisor, whatever, all these things. Also, I'm a mom. And then I'm really mindful of how I carry that and express my emotions around my oldest, especially, but my younger one too. And like, yeah, sometimes I'm listening to a song or there's this particular song, I'll be singing it and then just bam. I'm like, oh, they're here. The tears are here. Great. All right. Right. And then like just random stuff or like I'll be praying or something or just whatever. And then I'll just start crying. And then my daughter's like, why are you crying? And I'll be like, I miss my dad. He's gone. It's sad. It's really sad, you know? And so I think it's helpful, absolutely, to show your kids how to grieve. A lot of us grow up, right? I'm sure you've known people professionally and personally who had parents that didn't express emotions, right? How does that fare out?
Rough. I'd say it teaches people to bottle up their emotions, and like they don't have a safe space to do that, and that causes all kinds of problems mentally, physically, spiritually.
Mhm. And definitely emotionally, right? It ends up in a lot of inflammation physically and chronic illness more often than not.
Yes.
Yeah. Heart problems even because it's grief and it's just stuck there, right? A lot of thyroid stuff because the throat, the thyroid, that's blocked off. Definitely. So I think that's one thing is to like express emotions as you can, finding your safe people. And it's like, again, I know that a lot of people, especially with complex trauma, grow up in environments and are in environments where it isn't emotionally safe to emote, etc. And it isn't validating. I think that's where a good therapist would come in, right? Find someone that you vibe with, that you feel like you can trust and things like that, because not all therapists are created equal. And yeah. And then hopefully that could be a safe space, right? And there's different kinds of therapies, and there's like EMDR. Brittany and I are learning a bit more about EMDR, and you don't necessarily have to talk. Maybe you're going through trauma or reliving things and stuff like that, and that's fine. Find a good facilitator who will do EMDR, and you don't even have to talk about the serious, scary stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So we could grieve traumas, people, pets, experiences, stages of our lives. With people who've died, we can grieve like I learned this concept, I'm pretty sure when I was in grad school. And I showed it to my niece and then she like ran with it and I'm so glad that she had it and we still talk about it till this day, right? And it's probably like probably 10 years ago actually, 11. And her grandpa was dying. Her great grandpa was dying. And I was like, hey, well, we're learning about grief and they're talking about this concept of a living funeral. Are you familiar with those, Brittany?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about those?
So a living funeral would be like a celebration of someone's life who is anticipating to pass, but while they're still here to celebrate with us.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's a good opportunity for everybody to say bye, maybe for people to like even express themselves, like ask for forgiveness, give forgiveness, that kind of thing. I feel like that's kind of what people seek the most, you know, have some kind of closure. And
Yes.
it's nice because then like people don't end up regretting like, oh, I should have said bye, I should have done this, right? And a living funeral can be informal, right? Hey, y'all want to come over and hang out with grandpa or whatever. Or it could be formal. This is the date, this is the time, everybody come over, we'll have a feast type of thing. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And then I think, yeah, the other big things that I have is just like co-regulating with each other, right? So like again, when you find your safe people, just holding space for each other, breathing, you know, doing something of like, okay, things are getting intense. Are you cool? Do you want to take a break? You water? You need a hug? That kind of thing. And then with just validating. Yeah, Brittany, that sounds really hard. I'm so sorry that your pet died. And that's that stuff, right? Which is the opposite of like, oh, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Just be with it, you know? The more you can practice being with it, because I know a lot of anxieties sometimes come up again if we don't have resolved stuff, we can breathe, right? I'm so sorry. I really want to hold space for you. I also feel really triggered or I feel really anxious and I don't know why, or just like my body wants to like run away and I don't know why. When we're able to have these more like vulnerable and honest conversations, then we're able to grow, see each other and evolve together. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have any
Yeah.
final thoughts?
Yeah, I think as far as like what you mentioned with supporting others in grief, I think it means a lot just to be there and sit there and literally hold space without even providing validation if that seems hard. I think a lot of people feel like they need to say something, and sometimes somebody just needs you there to have you physically present. I think another thing that came to mind as you were talking is the way people can grieve. And something that I did that was really meaningful for me is to incorporate some sort of creativity or ritual or something I could include a little spirituality in, like maybe an art project or an event that I did outside, which I did separately on my own. And I also did with loved ones. And I felt like each experience was different, but really helpful. And so if you feel like you're struggling to grieve, I would recommend trying something like that that you're called to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We can also celebrate trauma anniversaries. You just reminded me of that. So it's or death anniversaries too, or and birthdays, right? Get together with whoever wants to go and like, hey, it's my dad's birthday. Do I want to go out to his favorite place? Stuff like that, right? Or maybe you had dinner, coffee Sundays, still continuing those rituals. I like that concept of ritual for sure. And the concept of birthing stuff when there's a lot of death, absolutely. And it can be a catalyst, in fact, right? and the fact that grieving can in fact be really lonely, and even just having people around or going sometimes where there's people, even that we don't know, just being around people can be really co-regulatory. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany.
Yes, thank you, Magdalena.
You're welcome. Thank you everybody for watching. If you create a book, get a consultation, anything like that, feel free to find us at loveishealingllc.com. And our handle on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram is at loveishealingllc. Until next time.